And now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be ever more acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. The kingdom of heaven is like something small that grows big, something simple that changes everything, something hidden that's worth all we have, something we search for to find the best, something indiscriminate that learns good judgment. Jesus has a lot to say about what the kingdom of heaven is like. A lot to say, not necessarily straightforward things to say. It is indeed good to be back. In this past month, I have been traveling quite a lot. I have managed to sleep at least 2 nights in 7 different provinces. Now, I didn't get to Canada's 3 northern territories, and I missed Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Newfoundland. But still, I have seen a lot of our glorious country. And even though I flew over the massive middle section, it was still a lot of driving. Perhaps the most dramatic takeaway from the whole experience is just how big Canada is. It is also diverse and awe-inspiring in so many interesting ways, but mostly I've been struck by how big it is. Now, I've driven through the mountains and valleys of BC and Alberta many times, and so the grandeur of that expanse is pretty familiar to me. I somehow thought, though, that the Maritimes were smaller. Now, maybe they are. I kind of think they are, but I don't exactly know. But they're still pretty big, at least bigger than I expected. So even just getting to the highlights has the kilometers adding up. From the history of Quebec City to the sand dunes of PEI's North Shore, from a taste of Cape Breton's music to the rocky beauty of Peggy's Cove, from small towns in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick to the muddy majesty of the Bay of Fundy, to the playfulness of old Montreal's Vieux-Port. We live in an awesome, intriguing, big place. I wonder if the kingdom of heaven is like that. This coming week, some of our parish leaders will meet with a diocesan leader to think about our ministry, the ministry here of St. George's, into the future in a big way. Over the kilometers this summer, I realized that among the big questions in considering our future is how big we want our ministry to be. With the meeting this week, we will open up a conversation particularly about our property, but that is just a beginning place. As we research and wonder over the coming months about what options there might be for this piece of land that we inhabit, we'll also explore and consider the impact and opportunities of those various options for our ministry. From our little corner of the world, this little island, this little church, this little community, how big might we be able to grow in ministry? In peace with justice, in reconciliation, in healing whatever ails our world. What matters most to us in our practice of Christian discipleship? If the kingdom of heaven is like the smallest of seeds that grows into a tree big enough to shelter the birds, how could our property be used to expand our ministry in the name of Christ beyond our little place to the broader church, the diocese, the world? Now, early in my time away this summer, I experienced the bigness of our country in a different way at the National Church meeting known as General Synod. Normally a triennial event, General Synod brings together the bishops of the Anglican Church of Canada, along with clergy and lay representatives from every part of our church, so that we can discuss our common life. The last General Synod was in 2019 and was for many a rather painful experience. I realized early on in this meeting that painful experience combined with the ensuing pandemic years meant that just the act of gathering itself was important for the healing of our church. And in the end, I think it was a necessary step for us to be able to move on together. One piece of work that had come out of 2019 was a review of our national governance structures. The proposals that the committee brought forward were for, in my opinion, pretty moderate changes, and yet sparked a surprising amount of emotion and debate. When one motion failed early in the meeting, after considerable and sometimes intense debate, it was clear that something different, a different approach, different ideas, something different was needed. And in the end, a few of the governance items were tabled to allow more time for deeper and I suspect more extensive changes to be considered. Over the course of the meeting, it had become clear that our formal governance structures were obscuring more than supporting the common mind that was clearly present in the room. And so we need to find a way to address that. We need to find ways to work differently. We need to figure out what to keep and what to release, what to let go of that isn't working, and maybe experiment with other different, newer processes, different options. If the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that just scoops up everything to be sorted later on the beach, then the work of General Synod was indeed holy work, which is, to be honest, easy to forget in that formerly structured, kind of awkward and uncomfortable debate that really only makes the messiness of the human community that is the church, makes it pretty obvious. It's trying to be very structured and ordered, but that's not actually the experience. It's pretty messy. Jesus tells us today that the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that scoops everything up, and that it's only when it's full and emptied out onto the beach that we can discern what systems, what structures are good and serving us well, and which need to be left behind. We sometimes talk about discernment in kind of lovely and romantic ways, but in reality, it is hard and vulnerable work. It's hard to admit that there are parts of our common life that are not good, especially when they once were good and served us well, and we don't know when or how things changed. We just know that they have. Nevertheless, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like an indiscriminate net that catches all kinds. Though all kinds, all systems, all structures are not necessarily good, and we don't need to pretend that they are. The kingdom of heaven is like a multitude of metaphors and moments in regular life, just turned a little sideways. And Jesus calls us to follow, not in the ways of the world, but in the ways of God. Jesus calls us to the kingdom of heaven to learn what it is like, so that we know it when we see it, we know it when we encounter it, and when we embody it, perhaps even unprepared and unexpected. The kingdom of heaven is the ordinary made extraordinary through grace.